My wife conspired with my parents to strip me of my life savings, then twisted my reality until I questioned my own sanity when I sought justice. I'm 42 years old, and for 14 of those years, I've been married to the woman I thought was my partner. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot, 17 years in total. Nearly 2 decades of shared memories, laughter, and trust. Yet, despite all that time, she betrayed me. All of this deceit began with my parents. They stole nearly $90,000 from me, my hard-earned life savings. I co-own a chain of restaurants with a couple of friends from business school. It's a modest success, bringing in decent income. But I wasn't content to settle. I had dreams, ambitions. I'd been meticulously saving to launch my own venture, something personal, something mine. Then, last month, my parents, Dad, 64, and Mom, 63, came to me, their voices dripping with desperation. They claimed they were drowning in financial troubles, on the brink of losing their home and everything they owned. They spun a tale about an old debt, borrowed long before I was born, from one of my father's distant relatives, his uncle, perhaps. My father had just started his career when my mother discovered she was pregnant with me. She had to quit her job, unable to juggle both work and impending motherhood. My dad's income was a trickle, not enough to cover the mounting bills. So, they borrowed money, promising to repay it within a few years. But they didn't stop. They kept borrowing, year after year, until Dad's income grew substantial. By then, I was in middle school, and their debt had ballooned. They pleaded with my great-uncle for more time, promising repayment after I graduated college. Years slipped by, yet no payments were made. When the uncle passed away a few years back, my parents believed they were off the hook. They were wrong. His son inherited the debt and came knocking, threatening legal action unless they repaid every cent. Since there were no official records, my parents had dismissed his threats until he issued a final warning. Connected and influential, he had the power to ruin them. That's when panic set in. They claimed they'd drained their savings, exhausted their retirement funds, and were teetering on the edge of ruin. They needed me to cover the remaining debt. Foolishly, I agreed. I didn't want my parents to suffer. Before transferring the money, I asked to speak directly with this so-called creditor, hoping to negotiate more time. But my parents insisted it was too risky. The man was volatile, they said. I just had to trust them. And I did. That trust was my biggest mistake. I wired the money, off the books, no paper trail. A week later, I found myself blocked on every platform. My parents had vanished. Their house sold just days after they received my money. They packed up and disappeared without a word. Neighbors filled in the gaps, telling me about the sudden move. Days turned into weeks. I waited, hoping they'd come back. They never did. Reality hit hard. I had been scammed by my own parents. My life savings, gone. The weight of betrayal was suffocating. The only comfort came from my wife. She held me, whispered reassurances, told me we'd recover. You still have your job. You can earn it back, she said. But it had taken me 15 years to save that $90,000. The thought of working another 15 to rebuild? Soul-crushing. I hired a lawyer, desperate to find a way out of this nightmare. But tracking my parents proved impossible. They had vanished without a trace. Hope dwindled. I was on the brink of giving up when, 2 weeks ago, an email appeared in my inbox. It was from my parents. They claimed they were sorry for scamming me, for weaving an elaborate web of lies. The truth? There was no distant relative, no ancient debt. It was a cover story to mask my father's gambling addiction. They knew if I discovered the real reason, I'd never give them the money. So they fabricated a tale of hardship, knowing it would tug at my heartstrings. They weren't wrong. If I had known the truth, I wouldn't have handed over a dime. They admitted using my money to settle Dad's gambling debts. They sold their house to disappear, convinced I'd want nothing to do with them after the betrayal. Their email ended with hollow apologies, pleading for forgiveness someday. Rage consumed me. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, determined to sue them. But when I told my wife, her response left me reeling. Maybe you shouldn't go after them. They've already been through so much. Why was she defending them? Suspicion crept in, an uneasy whisper I couldn't shake. Her words weren't just sympathetic, they felt rehearsed. I started noticing things I had overlooked before: secretive texts, late-night calls, conversations hushed the moment I entered the room. The final straw came when I checked our joint bank account, significant amounts of money missing, with transactions leading to an unfamiliar account. Driven by a gnawing dread, I hired a private investigator. Within days, the truth unraveled, more devastating than I could have imagined. My wife had been part of the scheme from the start. She wasn't just aware of my parents' plan, she had orchestrated it with them. They had split the money, and the comfort she offered was nothing more than a performance, designed to keep me from digging too deep. She never thought I'd suspect her. After all, who suspects their partner of such betrayal? Confronting her was surreal. She didn't deny it. Instead, she blamed me for being too trusting, for making it so easy. Her words cut deeper than any lie. Now, I sit amidst the wreckage of my life, stripped not just of my savings but of every thread of trust one once held dear. My parents are gone, my marriage is over, and I'm left piecing together the shards of a reality I thought was secure. Betrayal doesn't just steal your money. It steals your sense of self, your ability to believe. And that, perhaps, is the greatest loss of all. They had stolen from me. Not just pocket change, but a significant sum, money I'd toiled for, sacrificed for. But now, finally, we had the proof. A tangible confession, something we could wield like a weapon to reclaim what was mine. The process would be grueling, drawn out in courtrooms and paperwork, but wasn't it worth it? I hadn't spent years building my life just to watch it crumble under the weight of their deceit. When I confronted her, it detonated into an argument. She called me heartless, said they were my parents, and everyone makes mistakes. A tiny mistake, she claimed, as if scamming your own child was a minor lapse in judgment. She painted me as selfish, insisting that my parents hadn't felt safe enough to ask for help honestly. Instead, they'd resorted to trickery, not out of malice, but desperation. That was supposed to make it better. She likened gambling to any other addiction, arguing it strips away control, hollows people out until they're unrecognizable. My father, she said, was just another casualty of his own weakness, yes, but a victim nonetheless. She pleaded with me to be compassionate, to see beyond the money, to be a better son. But how could I? They'd chosen deceit over honesty. When I pointed this out, she twisted it back on me. Maybe they didn't feel safe because of how I was rigid, unapproachable. Maybe my own demeanor had driven them to it. According to her, I was the problem. The frustration was suffocating. Every point I made was flipped, reframed until doubt crept in like a slow leak, eroding my resolve. She was persuasive, manipulative, even. By the time the argument ended, I found myself on the phone with my lawyer, hesitating, asking him to pause the proceedings. Was I really in the wrong? Days passed in a haze of second-guessing. Her words echoed, threading through my thoughts, unraveling the certainty I'd once had. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe my reputation for being the bad cop at work had bled into my personal life. Maybe if I'd been softer, more open, my parents would have trusted me. I began to believe the money didn't matter as much. After all, my parents were still here, alive. Wasn't that more important? She certainly thought so. She accused me of valuing material things over family, of letting my obsession with financial security overshadow my humanity. We didn't speak for days after that fight. I slept on the couch, replaying our argument, scrolling through my parents' emails, trying to untangle my feelings. My lawyer kept urging me to act, to strike while the iron was hot, but I hesitated. Paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice, of losing my wife when I'd already lost my parents in every way that mattered. Then came the day that shattered everything. I'd taken time off work, drowning in depression, aimlessly drifting through the house like a ghost. That's when I noticed her phone, left behind on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications. Curiosity gnawed at me. I shouldn't look. But I did. I knew her password. My fingers moved before my conscience could catch up. At first, it was petty curiosity, just wanting to see if she'd vented to her friends about me. But then, a message popped up. From my mother. My heart pounded. Why were they even talking? I opened the thread, eyes scanning the words that would unravel my world. Have you convinced him not to go through with the lawsuit yet? Followed by another, if he sues us, the deal's off. The deal? Confusion morphed into dread. I scrolled up, needing answers, fearing them. And there it was, a digital paper trail of betrayal. My wife had been conspiring with my parents all along. It started the day my parents sent that fateful email. They'd reached out to her under the guise of concern. She played tough at first, threatening to expose them, claiming she'd take everything to the police unless they made things right. For a moment, she'd been on my side. But then, they made an offer, half of the money they'd stolen from me. A bribe wrapped in a family bond. And she'd accepted. They had the money. They weren't destitute, just unwilling to sacrifice their own comfort. Instead, they'd used me as their safety net. And my wife, my partner of nearly 2 decades, was their accomplice. She manipulated me, not out of love or concern, but greed. Every argument, every guilt trip, was part of their plan. My entire life felt like a lie. The screen's cold glow illuminated my trembling hands, each word etching itself into the ruins of my heart. Betrayal wasn't abstract anymore, it had a shape, a form, carved into every sentence I read. But there was no time to drown in heartbreak. Emotions could wait, evidence couldn't. My fingers moved mechanically, capturing screenshot after screenshot, like documenting the scene of a crime where love had been the victim. Not trusting just images, I recorded a video, scrolling through the damning messages, every flick of my thumb unveiling another fracture in the life I thought was real. I sent them all to myself, anchoring the truth before it could slip away. She'd be home soon. I was racing against the ticking clock of confrontation. My bag felt heavier than it should, stuffed with hastily packed clothes and essential documents, though the real weight was the knowledge of what I was leaving behind. I drove without direction, the city's familiar lights shrinking in my rearview mirror until darkness swallowed them whole. A nondescript hotel became my refuge, its sterile walls indifferent to the storm I carried inside. I shut off my phone, silencing the world, and her, with the press of a button. But silence is temporary. Eventually, I powered it back on, the screen exploding with notifications, her name over and over, desperate attempts to reach me. I didn't open them. Instead, I called my lawyer, my voice steady, unnervingly detached from the chaos inside. I forwarded the evidence, then looped in my parents. This wasn't just between me and her anymore, it was about everything she'd tainted. I was suing her, not just for the betrayal, but for the money she'd stolen from my family, disguised as love. Divorce wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Her texts evolved from confusion to frantic apologies. She painted herself as a misguided savior, claiming it was all for us, that I was missing the bigger picture. But lies don't build futures, they destroy them. We weren't struggling, we didn't need her schemes. It wasn't about survival. It was about greed. She twisted my forgiveness toward my parents, weaponizing my own heart against me. If her intentions had been pure, she wouldn't have needed to bury them under layers of deceit. Forgiveness might have been an option in another life, but trust? Trust was dead. Divorce was the funeral. Legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. My lawyer tracked down my parents, ironically elusive given their role in all this, and served them face to face, just like I'd requested. They didn't respond. But she did. Her texts morphed into frantic lifelines, pleading, bargaining, suffocating me with regret dressed as affection. Guilt seeped in, not because I believed her, but because breaking hearts, especially ones you once cherished, hurts, even when it's necessary. Weeks crawled by. I blocked her. Silence filled the spaces she used to occupy, and with it came clarity. The online voices that once felt distant now echoed truths I'd ignored. They were right, I should have left sooner. She never confessed, I caught her. That revelation alone was enough. Courtrooms replaced living rooms. Legal jargon replaced whispered promises. The verdict leaned in my favor. My parents would pay for their lies, and I'd reclaim what was stolen. At the first settlement meeting, their discomfort was palpable, a twisted comfort I didn't know I needed. She was there, too, her presence a shadow I couldn't outrun. She tried to approach me, eyes glossy with manufactured remorse. I didn't flinch. I left without a word, retreating to my hotel room where memories couldn't follow. I couldn't risk one more conversation. She knew how to unravel me with precision. No contact wasn't just strategy, it was survival. But today, that fragile barrier cracked. The hotel front desk called. She was here. Standing just beyond the lobby, waiting. Confusion clouded my mind as I sat there, replaying the moment over and over. I hadn't told anyone where I was, except for my lawyer and a couple of close friends I trusted implicitly. They wouldn't betray me. So how did she find me? When we finally spoke, her words hit me like a cold gust of wind. For days, she'd been scouring every hotel in and around town, relentless in her search. Now that she had tracked me down, she wasn't leaving without a conversation. I felt cornered. What choice did I have? I invited her up to my room, not wanting to create a scene in the lobby. The tension was suffocating as we entered. I waited, silent, my heart pounding, letting her break the silence. After an awkward pause, she finally spoke, asking me to stop the divorce proceedings. My mind reeled. How could she bring this up again? I told her bluntly that her presence was already too much, and she shouldn't make things worse by pushing me. There was no room for negotiation. I wasn't going to entertain any discussion about it. But she didn't back down. Instead, she offered to testify against my parents, claiming it would make everything easier if I just stayed with her. Ridiculous. Did she really believe that would change anything? I had to spell it out. She couldn't just flip a switch, turn on my parents, and expect me to come running back. She had shattered our relationship beyond repair, and the truth was, I didn't even want to fix it. I told her as much, trying to make it crystal clear. I was fighting to end this marriage, not to salvage it. But she couldn't grasp that. Her tears came next, accusing me of punishing her when she'd already learned her lesson. The absurdity of it all made me chuckle. Punishing her? Like I was a disgruntled teacher and she a wayward student? No. I was a husband betrayed, manipulated, and heartbroken. I'm not punishing you, I said, my voice steady. I'm protecting myself. Staying away from you is the best thing I can do right now. Still, she cried, insisting she did it all for us, unwilling to throw away over a decade of her life over what she called a stupid little mistake. I had no words. Sure, the divorce hurt me too. But what was the point of staying if trust was dead? That's what she needed to understand. I softened my tone, hoping to get through to her. I can't be with you, even though I love you. You broke my trust, and that's not something you can undo. No matter what you do, it won't erase the damage. Even if we stayed together, I'd keep doubting you. We'd both be miserable. I thought she finally understood. But then she stood up, defiant, claiming I was wrong. She vowed to keep fighting for us, insisting that unlike me, she wasn't ready to give up on our marriage because of a misunderstanding. And just like that, she walked out, leaving me drowning in frustration. For the past hour, I've been sitting here, wondering what to do. This could have been a straightforward divorce, clean and simple. But she's determined to make it as difficult as possible. I told my lawyer, but there's not much we can do. If she refuses the divorce, the process drags on. It's infuriating, but my hands are tied. Update 3. I haven't posted in a while, but here's the latest. The legal battle continues, but I'm winning. My parents are stalling, trying to buy time. My wife is still fighting against the divorce, even though it's been months since we started. Honestly, I feel bad for her. She's clearly in denial. Her family won't speak to her either, probably because they know the truth now. It must be tough, but that's not my problem. Update 4. It's been months since my first post, and today, justice was served. The court ordered my parents and my wife to return all the money they took from me. Their lawyers fought hard, even though they knew they'd lose. The satisfaction I felt when they realized they were defeated? Unmatched. I'll carry that moment with me for a long time. As for my wife, the divorce is inevitable. Whether she agrees or not doesn't matter anymore. Legally, it's just a formality. In my mind, I've already moved on. We're done, thanks to her own selfishness and manipulation. I've left the hotel and moved into my own apartment. The house division is still pending, but I hope it goes to me. I deserve it after everything. We still have to split our assets, but I think selling everything and dividing the proceeds is fair. Generous, even, considering she tried to cheat me out of my share. She doesn't contact me anymore, and that's a relief. She must finally realize it's over. I'm focusing on my business plans now, ready to rebuild my life. It'll be a long journey, but it'll be worth it.